I beg you not to importune me any further. The need for interpersonal distance in healthy relationships. Carrie Graves, Com 616, July 2017, Queen's University of Charlotte. I'd like to talk today about the importance of distance in interpersonal relationships. It may seem counterintuitive, but distance is an important aspect of relationships. It is what keeps perspective in place. And it also prevents codependency. It keeps us from turning the other into ourselves, from pressing boundaries and assuming closeness too quickly. An unethical communication problem occurs when one demands that you fit their approval. An example of this is in the 1995 BBC production of Jane Austen's Pride and Prejudice, my favorite movie, and Pride and Prejudice being my favorite book. I'd like to use that as the example to demonstrate this principle. In Jane Austen's works, especially in Pride and Prejudice, the good of boundaries is protected by the heroine Elizabeth Bennet. She encounters Lady Catherine de Bourgh, a nouveau riche woman of great importance, who puts her fancy on Elizabeth and presses herself upon Elizabeth from about the moment they first meet. She invites Elizabeth to her mansion at Rosings and asks her questions about her life, engages with her, brings her in as almost one of her own, in a rather sly and deceptive, yet desperate way. Elizabeth is always kind, thanking Lady Catherine for her kindnesses, but keeps her boundaries. Lizzie is firm in her principles, and she does not try to turn the other into herself. She is always Elizabeth Bennet. At the end of the story, Lady Catherine is upset. Her boundaries, she feels, have been violated by Elizabeth, but it is she who has encouraged this violation in the first place. She is angered when Lizzie continues to protect her own boundaries, keeping appropriate distance and not assuming too much closeness in this relationship. In the end, it pays off for Elizabeth. Too much closeness from the beginning might have clouded her view of how she should act in the end. I'd like to show you a clip from the movie now. See what you can see between these two characters. See where distance would have been beneficial in this relationship.
Norma's carriage has arrived.
Extremely small hall.
If you will wait here, your ladyship, and someone visitors your ear.
No, I will not wait. Where is she? Is this the drawing room?
Lady Catherine de Bourgh.
That lady, I suppose, is your mother.
Yes, she is. Mamma, this is Lady Catherine de Bourgh.
And that, I suppose, is one of your sisters.
Yes, ma'am. She is my youngest girl, but one. My youngest of all is lately married.
You have a very small park here. And this must be a most inconvenient sitting room for the evening in summer. Why, the windows are full west.
Indeed they are, your ladyship. But we never sit in here after dinner. We have...
Miss Bennet, there seemed to be a prettish kind of little wilderness on one side of your lawn. I should be glad to take a turn in it, if you would favor me with your company. You can be at no loss to understand the reason for my journey, Miss Bennet.
Indeed, you are mistaken, madam. I am quite unable to account for the honor of seeing you here.
Miss Bennet, you ought to know I am not to be trifled with. But however insincere you choose to be, you shall not find me so. A report of an alarming nature reached me 2 days ago. I was told not only that your sister was to be most advantageously married, but that you, Miss Elizabeth Bennet, would be soon afterwards united to my own nephew, Mr. Darcy. Oh, I know it must be a scandalous falsehood. I instantly resolved on setting off for this place to make my sentiments known to you.
If you believed it to be impossible, I wonder you took the trouble of coming so far. What would your ladyship propose by it?
At once to insist upon having such a report universally contradicted.
Your coming to Longbourn to see me will be taken as a confirmation of it, if indeed such a report exists.
This is not to be borne. Miss Bennet, I insist on being satisfied. Has my nephew made you an offer of marriage?
Your ladyship has declared it to be impossible.
It ought to be so. But your arts and allurements may have made him forget what he owes to himself and all the family. You may have drawn him in.
If I had, I should be the last person to confess it.
Miss Bennet, do you know who I am? I have not been accustomed to such language as this. I am almost the nearest relation he has, and I am entitled to know all his nearest concerns.
But you are not entitled to know mine, nor will such behavior as this induce me to be explicit.
Let me be rightly understood. This match to which you have the presumption to aspire can never take place. Mr. Darcy is engaged to my daughter. Now, what have you to say?
Only this, that if he is so, you can have no reason to suppose he'll make an offer to me.
The engagement between them is of a peculiar kind. From their infancy, they have been intended for each other. It was the favorite wish of his mother as well as hers. While she was in her cradle, we planned the union. And now to be prevented by the upstart pretensions of a young woman without family connections or fortune. Is this to be endured? It shall not be. Your alliance would be a disgrace. Your name would never even be mentioned by any of us.
These would be heavy misfortunes indeed.
Obstinate, headstrong girl, I'm ashamed of you. I have not been in the habit of brooking disappointment.
That will make your ladyship's situation at present more pitiable, but it will have no effect on me.
I will not be interrupted. If you were sensible of your own good, you would not wish to quit the sphere in which you've been brought up.
Lady Catherine, in marrying your nephew, I should not consider myself as quitting that sphere. He is a gentleman, I am a gentleman's daughter. So far, we are equal.
But who is your mother? Who are your uncles and aunts? Do not imagine me ignorant of their condition.
Whatever my connections may be, if your nephew does not object to them, they can be nothing to you.
Tell me once and for all, are you engaged to him?
I am not.
And will you promise me never to enter into such an engagement?
I will make no promise of the kind, and I must beg you not to importune me any further on the subject.
Not so hasty, if you please. I have another objection. Your youngest sister's infamous elopement. I know it all. Oh, is such a girl to be my nephew's sister-in-law? Are the shades of Pemberley to be thus polluted?
You can have nothing further to say. You have insulted me by every possible method. I must beg to return to the house.
You have no regard, then, for the honor and credit of my nephew. Unfeeling, selfish girl. You refuse to oblige me. You refuse the claims of beauty, honor, gratitude. You are determined to ruin him and make him the contempt of the world.
I am only resolved to act in a manner which will constitute my own happiness without reference to you or to any person so wholly unconnected with me.
And this is your final resolve? Very well, I shall know how to act. I take no leave of you, Miss Bennet. I send no compliments to your mother. You deserve no such attention. I am most seriously displeased. Drive on.
In the scene just viewed, Lady Catherine has made a 21st century mistake, that of assuming instant intimacy. She fancies herself a patroness, and when she invites Elizabeth to Rosings some months before this scene occurs, assumes that Elizabeth will fit her approval and live under her ideals. She has lived a life encouraging people to do so, and finding those who are weak in spirit who follow her desires. Because of this assumed intimacy and lack of respect for boundaries and appropriate distance in this interpersonal relationship, Lady Catherine finds herself in a pickle at the end of the story. She cannot get Elizabeth, who is below her in social class, to bow to her will, and she is extremely frustrated. Christy Carver, in her article Channeling Jane Austen, How Jane Austen Made Her a Better Therapist, is a paraphrase of the subtitle, talks about appropriate boundaries in Jane Austen's works and in the therapy setting. A Night at Rosings in Pride and Prejudice, Carver writes, has a rhythm, the formal introductions, conversation, tea, the setting of the tables for cards. Therapy also has a rhythm, the formal introductions, the duos sitting across from each other, the structure of the conversation with respectful listening by the therapist, openness from the patient. The ritual provides safety. Safety is essential in establishing trust. I would posit that Carver's principles for an appropriate therapy session also apply to appropriate interpersonal relationships. When we first meet an acquaintance, no matter how drawn we are to them, it is appropriate to keep distance and let the relationship evolve and unfold. Even after intimate time spent together, distance is required to see the big picture. Up close, you see a tree. From a distance, you see that tree as part of a range of mountains. Elizabeth doesn't feel safe with Lady Catherine in the scene in the end of the film. She's visibly shaken, perhaps because she does not feel safe. But she has kept distance. She has not assumed an appropriate intimacy with Lady Catherine, despite Lady Catherine's generous offerings of her resources and riches. Elizabeth takes them with a grain of salt, thanks her, and keeps the relationship in the appropriate framework. In the end, this serves Lizzie well when she is forced to stand up to Lady Catherine. She owes her nothing. She has thanked her for all she has done for her in the past, and she is in a position to stand firm in her own principles. From the moment that scene begins, Lady Catherine assumes inappropriate boundaries, stating that she's entitled to know her nephew's most intimate affairs, and assuming that extends to Elizabeth, who is rumored to be his soon-to-be fiancée. The references used in this article come from the textbook Communication Ethics Literacy, Dialogue and Difference, in which you can read more about interpersonal distance and relationships. Other references, such as the film, Jane Austen's Pride and Prejudice, the book, and the article Channeling Jane Austen, are listed here.